Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'm reacting to a live stream from the SC Dawa channel featuring Hamza Tzortzis and Subboor Ahmad titled Calling All Atheists Live Q&A. The discussion covered a wide range of topics including atheism, consciousness, free will, the problem of evil, heaven, and Islam. But one idea stood out above everything else. It was the foundation upon which many of the other arguments rested. Hamza argued that belief in God is the natural default position of human beings. He appealed to the Islamic concept of fitra, the idea that every person is born with an innate disposition toward believing in a creator. He went further and argued that God is a self-evident truth, much like the existence of time or the external world. His conclusion was that atheists are asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, quote, does God exist? They should simply first explain why they are rejecting what is supposedly humanity's natural default. I actually agree with Hamza more than you might expect. I do think it's natural for human beings to ask questions like, why am I here? Where did the universe come from? Who created me? Those questions seem deeply human. I don't think anyone has to teach a child to wonder about the world around them. But this is where I think Hamza makes a very important leap that simply does not follow. He moves from saying these questions are natural to implying that they somehow point toward the truth of Islam. I don't think they do, and here's why. There's a huge difference between having a universal intuition and having a universally correct answer. Suppose every human being naturally wonders what happens after death. Does that tell us what actually happens after death? No. It simply tells us that humans are curious about death. Likewise, if nearly everyone wonders whether there's a creator, that tells us something fascinating about human psychology. It tells us we are meaning-seeking creatures. It tells us we naturally look for explanations. But it does not tell us that one particular explanation is true. This distinction is incredibly important because history gives us a remarkable observation. If God implanted the same intuitive knowledge into every human being, why didn't humanity arrive at the same conclusion? Instead, we see thousands of different religions. Some believed in one God, others believed in many gods. Some believed in spirits, others believed in reincarnation. Some worshipped nature, others worshipped ancestors. Some believed God became a man, others believed God could never become a man. Some accepted Muhammad, most of humanity did not. These aren't tiny disagreements, these are fundamentally contradictory worldviews. Now think about that for a moment. The intuition may be common, but the answers are all over the map. To me, that suggests something very different from Hamza's conclusion. It suggests that human beings naturally ask the same question, but then use culture, tradition, imagination, philosophy, personal experience, and religious upbringing to construct very different answers. The shared intuition does not authenticate any of those answers. It merely explains why religions exist in the first place. There's another reason I'm cautious about treating intuition as evidence. Human intuition has been spectacularly wrong before. The Earth feels perfectly still. For thousands of years it seemed obvious that the sun revolved around us. Objects appear solid even though they're mostly empty space at the atomic level. Time feels absolute, even though modern physics has shown that our intuitions about space and time are incomplete. Living organisms certainly look designed, but evolutionary theory provides an extraordinarily powerful natural explanation for why living things appear designed without requiring that appearance itself. Why living things appear designed without requiring that appearance itself to be direct evidence of a designer. The lesson here isn't that intuition is useless, far from it. Intuition is often an excellent starting point. It tells us what questions to investigate. It does not tell us when we've arrived at the correct answer. And this leads me to what I think is the biggest problem with Hamza's argument. Let's suppose, just for the sake of discussion, that I grant him everything. Suppose I grant that there is a creator. Where exactly does that get us? Not very far. It certainly doesn't get us to Islam. It doesn't tell us Allah exists. It doesn't tell us Gabriel exists. It doesn't tell us Muhammad is a prophet. It doesn't tell us the Quran is divine. Those are all additional claims, enormous additional claims. Each one requires its own independent evidence. That is why I often say that even if someone convinced me tomorrow that a creator exists, I would still be nowhere near Islam. The distance between there is a creator and Muhammad is God's final messenger is enormous, and that brings me to the question I always come back to. If there really is an all-powerful God who wants humanity to know him, why communicate this way? Why does the chain of communication look like this? God, then an invisible angel, then one man living in 7th century Arabia, then oral transmission, then manuscripts, then centuries of scholarship, then translations, then me. Why? Why not communicate directly with every human being? If God created every single one of us, surely he is capable of speaking to every single one of us. Instead, I'm being asked to trust that one man correctly reported conversations with an invisible being over 1400 years ago. That isn't impossible, but it is an extraordinarily indirect way for an omnipotent God to communicate with humanity. And when the stakes are eternal heaven or eternal hell, I think it's a perfectly reasonable question to ask why God's communication strategy depends so heavily on human intermediaries. So my disagreement with Hamza is actually much narrower than it might first appear. I agree that humans naturally search for meaning. I agree that humans naturally wonder whether there is something beyond this universe. I agree that these questions seem deeply rooted in our nature. But none of those tells me which answer is correct. A universal question is not the same thing as a universal truth. The existence of an intuition does not validate one particular religion. And before I place my trust in Muhammad, the Quran, angels, revelation, and an entire supernatural worldview, I need evidence that goes beyond the simple observation that human beings naturally ask profound questions. Questions are universal, answers are not. And that's the distinction I think Hamza's argument overlooks.